What is up, fam? It is Shar, and welcome to Law and Living Color, where I provide quick tips and experiences on the law school process and legal field as a person of color. So today I wanted to go over my summer reading list. This is not a reading list that law school gives you. This is just what I am currently reading or have read pre-law school. Some of them actually talk about navigating law school, while others are pretty much law related. Enjoy your summer before law school. That's number one. But if you're not used to reading, get used to it, whether that be just reading a good amount of books. Don't read cases or trial books from what I was told. Just read, get used to reading. Personally, I am a very big bookworm. I read a lot in my free time. So when I was told that, I was like, bet. And so I found some really cool books that have given me some insight into what law school may be like. I would say especially with the law school specific books, take that information with a grain of salt. Some of these books, well, two of them that I will be talking about, are a little bit outdated. Also, the study habits or the study skills that they give to you aren't necessarily always applicable to everyone. I know that. So just, when you're reading, take that into your discretion. But it does provide some interesting things as far as, when I've talked to some law school students, and it provides some things that I haven't really heard of. And I'm like, oh, I might try that when I go. So, let's get into it. So for law school specific books, one that I read that I actually enjoyed was How to Crush Law School. The title is actually longer. It's How to Crush Law School, How to Be the Top of Your Class and Land Your Dream Job. That's the full title. So the author of the book is Charles Buist. He is an attorney. I believe he currently is an attorney. And he wrote this book as pretty much like a self-help guide, tips and tricks to guide you through law school. I also recommend just reading self-help books in general on how to manage anxiety and test anxiety and stuff like that, because that's pretty much applicable to any educational or environment. So out of a 5-star rating, I think on my Instagram I gave it 5 out of 5. I guess looking back into it now, because I reread some of it, I probably give it a 4 out of 5, just because I don't think the tips is universally applicable. And I guess the tone of the book was pretty commanding rather than suggestive, if that makes sense. You have to read it to understand what I'm saying. One book that I feel like I would give 5 out of 5 stars, and I ended up doing that on my Instagram. And these law school specific books I put on my Instagram page. So go ahead and follow my Instagram. I do put, reading suggestions and suggestions in general through the process that that were helpful to me, along with the YouTube, of course. And subscribe to the YouTube, because, that's what this is here for as well. So not to get off track, but another book that I gave around 5 stars for was 1L. The full title, sorry, I'm referring to my phone here because the full title is pretty long. 1L, The Turbulent True Story of a First Year at Harvard Law School. And it's very much a narrative, a memoir sort of speak, and it gives really good insight to the rigor of law school. It is a bit old, but I still feel like a lot of what it was talking about will probably be some of the things that you'll see in law school moving forward. So another book that I suggested on my Instagram was 24 Hours with 24 Lawyers by Jasper Kim. And that is not necessarily law school specific. It's more so post-law school. So it literally provides 24 lawyers and their day-to-day from 6 in the morning until 6 p.m. and literally, or 6 a.m. to 6 a.m., 24 hours. And you see from when they wake up, what they do, how early they wake up, how they get their day started, what they do in the office. So of course, this is not something that they, a lot of these attorneys and most attorneys, your day-to-day is going to be different. However, a good amount of it is still routine, and I found it very, very insightful. So I gave it 4 stars, 4 out of 5 stars on my Instagram. And the reason why I look back on it now and I probably give it 4.5 out of 5. And the reason why not 5 is because it didn't really have the practice areas that I'm looking into going into. It had being a prosecutor, it had being a family law attorney, it had being an immigration attorney, but none of them really aligned with what I wanted to do immediately post post law school. So that was kind of a downside for me, but it did give me insight to so many other practice areas. And I definitely recommend reading this before law school, just to give you some insight on like what you possibly want to specialize in, rather than completely finding that out while in law school. So now on to the books that I'm reading that are law related, and I say related, not specific, and they're not law school specific. So my first one was actually recommended to me by an attorney that I used to work with at a prior role, and it's called Root and Branch by Ron James Jr. The full title is Root and Branch, Charles Hamilton Houston, Thurgood Marshall, and the Struggle to End Segregation. And Ron James Jr. is a former assistant attorney general in DC. He's still a practicing attorney, and the book is really a historical reading about Charles Houston and Thurgood Marshall and their paths in life, how they became the attorneys they became, all the way from, you know, the start of them, how they ended up in law school, how law school was for blacks back in the day. Like, you can't, when you were, you know, black back then, you weren't just able to go to Harvard Law. We still had school segregation. It's a really great historical reference. It's very well researched, very, very well written. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. 5 out of 5 stars all the way. Another book that I'm actually currently reading and that I highly recommend, I'm just going to tell you right now, 5 out of 5, and I'm not even done with the book, but 5 out of 5 stars, is Just Pursuit by Laura Coates. The full title is Just Pursuit, A Black Prosecutor's Fight for Fairness. And boy, it is essentially a narrative memoir. And what she does is she breaks the book up by like the cases she experienced and how those cases tied into her identity, into what she wanted to be as an attorney. So each chapter is a different case, and you know, I think it's a very easy read. I'll say that. It's not a difficult read at all. So it's not something that she goes so in depth to the case that she's using all this legal terminology. No, the book is written by her in her voice. Laura Coates currently is a CNN analyst. She was an attorney for a really long time, but now you may have seen her on TV. And if you are interested in being a prosecutor and you're a person of color, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. Being a prosecutor doesn't necessarily mean you're the bad guy. Being a defense attorney doesn't necessarily mean you're the bad guy. I do think it's important to get an insight into what being those two types of things are. There's so many ethics that go into being an attorney, and you're going to be fighting with that regardless of whether you're on the defense side or the prosecution side. So getting that insight from her on the prosecution side I find it very, very insightful. I personally never wanted to be a prosecutor for my own reasons. And I'm not saying that this book fuels that perspective, like don't be a prosecutor. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it actually gives like really raw, you know, insight into it. Like, this is my experience. Take what you will from it, essentially. My last book that I'm going to recommend is by an author by the name of Mark Jimenez, and he was a practicing attorney for about 10 years. He went to Notre Dame Law, but he practiced in Dallas, where he's from, for a big law firm for a really long time before he just decided he was not going to be an attorney anymore, and he was going to write law thriller books. And that in of itself was like, yeah, Shara, you need to check this out because this sounds amazing. So the book that I'm specifically referring to is the first book of a 4-part series, with the main character being the consistent thing in that series. It's called The Color of Law. And what it's essentially about is that you have this fresh attorney who's now working for this big law firm, and he gets a case where a big politician's son is murdered, and he has to defend the prime suspect, which is a, you know, pretty much drug addict prostitute. And it, you know, goes from there. Very interesting premise. So full disclaimer, I also have not fully finished this book yet. I got Just Pursuit and like stopped reading it and then started reading Just Pursuit. And I don't want to say that like because it's a bad book and I switch. No, I do that a lot. Like, I'll switch and then I'll go back. It depends on what I'm feeling like. But as of right now, I am still enjoying the book. I'm not saying like the book isn't boring to me in the least bit. It's still very intriguing. So I do recommend that book, and it's going to be the only book in this video that I have no rating for. Sorry, y'all. Life update. And I will go into more detail later on, but I wanted to tell y'all now. So there has been, again, another pause in making videos and producing content, and I'm sorry, y'all. It's been a hectic 2-3 weeks. I applied to a law fellowship that I was waiting to hear back from. And I heard back literally the day before my birthday, which is insane. It was a great birthday gift. And I ended up getting it. So I'll be in Chicago for the summer. Well, I'll be in New York for 2 weeks, and then I'll be in Chicago for the rest of my time. And I'll be interning, being a fellow for a big law firm. Very excited about it. And again, I will go into more detail later. I'm not going to go into too much detail now about what fellowship is it and who's sponsoring it. I will go into that later, but I'm very excited about it. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, please like, comment, and subscribe. As always, follow my socials. Hit me up with any questions y'all have, either in the comments below or on my socials. And all love here, y'all. All love here. And I really hope you enjoyed some of these book suggestions. I do, because I loved all of these books. Peace, guys.